Shalom, everyone, and welcome back to my twice weekly videos. I hope you're enjoying them. I know you are enjoying them because I hear from you all the time, and I look forward to hearing from you as well. Please send me your comments. Let me know what you think of them. This week's Torah portion, we read the story of Noah and the flood, about how God saw that the world was evil, was the people were sinning, there was corruption, there was violence, there was interbreeding of species, and God chose to cause the world to be destroyed. And he brought a tremendous flood to the world, and only Noah, his children, his wife, and his children's wives, as well as the animals, came into the ark. Which animals came into the ark? So we are told that two of every kind came into the ark, but it also says that seven of every kind came into the ark. What was the seven and what was the two? So our sages tell us that the seven were seven kosher animals of each type. Why would he need seven kosher animals of each type, male and female, and only two of non-kosher animals? Is it because he didn't like the kosher animals very much? No. Because after the flood, he was going to give a series of sacrifices, and you could only give sacrifices from kosher animals. So therefore, if he only had one of each kind, one male and one female, and he took one of them to be sacrificed, well, there goes the species. It's all over. So therefore, it was necessary for him to have seven of every male and seven of every female of the kosher animals for that reason. This Torah portion talks a lot about how to treat animals. And Noah, he himself was the greatest example of all of them. Noah took care of the animals, fed the animals, protected them while they were in the ark. And there's an interesting story that one time he came late to feed the lion, so the lion bit him. Noah worked very hard. He was exhausted. They said he had blood coming from his mouth. He was so tired and so exhausted. He was a very old man. And nevertheless, he spent all his days and nights caring for the animals in such a loving way. And indeed, we need to learn from Noah how to treat animals as well in such a way. There are many laws dealing with animals and how to treat animals, that you have to feed them before you feed yourself, that you cannot be cruel to animals. We are told that some of the famous serial killers started out before they started killing people by torturing animals as well. So the care of animals and the kindness that we treat animals is a very, very important part of Jewish life. We call this Sar Balei Chaim. Be careful not to uh, inflict pain upon animals and how important that is. Nevertheless, in Jewish law, we are permitted to use animals for our own purposes, providing they're in a humane way. We're allowed to eat them, provided we slaughter them in a humane way, according to the laws of ritual slaughter. We are allowed to use them to enhance mankind, to improve mankind, to make mankind better. But again, providing we treat them in a kind way as well. Even before we slaughter them, we need to treat them in a kind way. Reminded of a friend of mine who was a shochet, a ritual slaughterer in one of the slaughterhouses in Canada. And he would tell me that they would sit around the table and they would have their lunch, the slaughterers, and some of the animals, the little goats or the little lambs would come by and they would take some of their food and they would feed it to the little lamb and pet them on their skin. And then when the bell rang, right away they went and they slaughtered them. There was no contradiction for them because while they're alive, to treat them with respect and treat them in a kind way. But slaughtering is slaughtering as long as it's done in a kosher way. The Torah tells us that after the flood, God gave Noah and his children a permission now to eat meat. Before this, they were not allowed to eat meat. Adam and all of the 10 generations from Adam to Noah were not permitted to eat meat. They were all vegetarian. It's very possible that when Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes, we'll all be vegetarians once again. Speaking about Mashiach, the flood is seen by many of the rabbis as an example of what it will be like when Mashiach comes. As the prophet Isaiah says, the wolf will lie down with the lamb, the animals will not fight with each other, the most ferocious animals will get along with many of the kinder animals, And this is exactly what happened in the flood. And this is exactly what will happen when Mashiach comes. The Torah tells us that after the flood, Noah had to bring the animals out of the ark. They didn't want to come because life was so good to them in the ark. They were fed, they were taken care of, they were healthy, and they didn't want to leave. Very similar to the idea of Mashiach. When Mashiach comes, we'll all be very happy, and we won't want to leave that state. It'll be a very, very good and a positive state. Now, let's share with you a story that I heard regarding an animal. And this really actually happened. One time, there was a professor from England who was coming to New York, and he had some business there. And he wanted, whenever he came to New York, he always used to stop off at the graveside of the Rebbe to say a prayer there. So he took a taxi, and when he went into the taxi cab, JFK Airport is right near the Rebbe's grave in the Montefiore Cemetery in New York and Queens. So he went into the cab, and he said to the cab, "I want to go to a certain address in Manhattan, but before there, I want to stop off at a cemetery and say a prayer there." And he gave the driver the address of the cemetery, the Montefiore Cemetery. So they're going, and the taxi driver asked the professor, "Why do you want to go to a grave? I mean, New York, there's shows, there's museums, there's all kinds of things." He said, "Well, because I'm Jewish, and a very holy rabbi is buried there, and I want to pray there. I go there every time I come here, I pray there." So the taxi driver said, "Really? Well, I am also Jewish. Does it cost anything to go there?" The professor said, "No, not at all." And the taxi driver says, "Do I need to make a reservation to go there?" "No, no, anybody can go. It's open 24 hours a day. Come." So they got out of the taxi, and both the taxi driver and the rabbi approached the ohel, the grave, and the professor starts praying and reading the words from the siddur, and he notices that his friend, the taxi driver, starts crying and crying and crying and crying. Well, the professor waited for the taxi driver to stop crying, and then they went back in the taxi back to the professor's hotel room. The professor said, "Excuse me for asking, but why were you crying so much? Are you praying for someone in particular who is ill, or what? Why are you crying?" "Oh," the taxi driver said, well, what it is my dog is sick. My dog is very, very sick. And we're so worried about my dog that he might die. So I'm praying for his health." And the professor said, "Praying for a dog so much like that? I mean, why, why would you cry so much for a dog?" Well, he said, "My wife and I had been married many years, and we had no children. So someone suggested we get a dog. So we got a dog many years ago, and we loved this dog so much. And this dog gave us such happiness and such comfort. And the dog became like our child. So when the dog got sick, we were praying for the dog, and we took the dog to doctors and everything, and he needed an operation. And we're so worried that we're going to lose our beloved child, our beloved dog." So the professor thought this was very odd. He said, "Well, I can't see it, but if that's how you feel about it, okay." So the taxi driver saw that the professor was not so sympathetic, but the professor realized he hurt the taxi driver's feelings. So he said to him, "Listen, here's my card. Um, give me a call. Let me know how the operation went. That it should work out okay. Okay, give me a call after the operation." So the taxi driver said, "Okay." And he dropped the man off in his hotel room, and off he went. A week went by, 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by. Nothing happened at all. The professor forgot about it. Many years later, the professor gets a phone call from the taxi driver. And the professor was very happy to hear from him. He said, "Oh, I remember you. How was your dog?" "Oh," he said, "my dog completely recovered. It was wonderful. He was so happy. It was the blessing of the Rebbe. It was the blessing of the Rebbe. So since my dog got so better and became healthy, I went back to the OL and I prayed for a child. And guess what? Just last week we had a child. We had his bris. So isn't that a wonderful thing?" So the professor said, "Well, that's very nice, but why didn't you call me Why didn't you contact me after your dog got better? Well, the professor said, I knew you didn't really seem to care so much about my dog. So I figured, let me wait and see if there's other better news later on. But when my child was born, I knew you'd be happy about that. So I decided to call you now and tell you about that. So we learned from that an important story that just because a dog is a dog, just because an animal is an animal, doesn't mean that we should not love it. We should not take care of it. We should not be concerned about it. Certainly, one of the very first things that happened when I came to University City is a family in our community called me up and they said that their dog died. And they wanted to know if I could make a funeral for the dog. Well, I had been a young rabbi when I came out here, and it was a little unusual. I had not really done too many dog funerals in the past before. So I thought, well, still, their little boy was crying over the dog. Let me go over. So I went over to their house, and the dog was laying down on the pavement before they called animal control to pick him up. So I did a little funeral for the dog. We said a few prayers. We said, spoke a little bit about the dog. And the little boy, who is now a grown man, felt very, very good about that. Felt very, very well about that. So we know that dogs can really tear at our hearts. And animals in general can be very special, but we need to be special to them. We need to take care of them as well. And that's something that Noah teaches us how he treated the animals in the ark and how the animals acted in the ark. And this is indeed like the times of Mashiach when everyone will lay down with everyone in a happy, good way, and there'll be no more hatred in the world, and there will only be love, and there'll be peace in the world, and may it happen soon in our day. Candle lighting tonight in San Diego, Friday night, is at 5:48 p.m. We're still davening outside, unless it rains, of course. It might rain this weekend. We don't know yet. And masks are required, and social distancing is strictly observed. And we encourage you to come if that's what you'd like. We're happy to have you. So I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you again on Tuesday. Bye.